I'm Thomas Caleel. I'm the former director of MBA admissions and financial aid for the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. It's my alma mater. I graduated in 2003, which seems like ancient history now, but I have perspective as an applicant, as a student, as the former director of admissions, and now as somebody who's worked in education for over 20 years. You know, I'm always wary of things like MBA specializations because trends come and go. And, you know, when I think back to when I first started in 2001 as a student at the Wharton School, first most popular major was finance, second most popular major was e-commerce. And for those of us old enough to remember the dawn of e-commerce, it seemed like absolutely the newest thing. B2B, B2C was revolutionary. And almost overnight, the concept of e-commerce at that time crashed. And we had a lot of MBAs who had spent 2 years now studying something that was almost obsolete. So I always urge students to focus on fundamentals. You go to an MBA to learn how to be a manager, how to be a leader, how to understand strategy, finance, marketing, accounting, all of the core components of a business. And so I would strongly recommend not chasing a particular trend, but learning your fundamentals and then being able to use and adapt them throughout the entirety of your career. So generative AI is, it's very, very tricky. It's a very difficult thing. And what I encourage applicants to do is pay very close attention to the application. So when you submit an application, you sign your name. You type your name in, and you're signing something called the Statement of Application Integrity. And in short, it says, all of the work in here is my own. Many schools now specifically include language that says, do not use any kind of generative AI, ChatGPT, whatever it is, that is specifically prohibited. Okay, so that's number one. The reason that they have you sign that is so that if they find out that you misrepresented yourself, they can and often will revoke your admission. And what that means, and I've sat on these committees before, is 2 days before graduation, they find out that you used generative AI to write your application, they can withdraw your admission, which means you've paid 2 years worth of tuition, you've attended all the classes, and you are not allowed to say you are an alumnus or alumna of the school. And that is devastating and not something that you want to have happen. But more importantly is that, and this is coming from somebody who's read hundreds of thousands of applications, you're missing the greatest opportunity, which is to express yourself. Tell the admissions committee who you are. So as an admissions officer, you're reading dozens of files every day, and you're doing that 7 days a week for weeks and weeks on end. I can tell you it is a grinding, numbing process that makes you question your sanity. And what happens is that if you're reading an essay that's been generated by AI, or if you've had too much input on that essay, right? You have a counselor who's changing your words and writing for you. You have a well-meaning partner, spouse, friend, parent who's coming in and providing input. You lose the essence of your voice. And most applicants kind of smile when you say that because they don't have the perspective that comes from reading essay after essay after essay after essay. And what happens is when you start reading an essay that is over-polished and overdone and doesn't really have an authentic voice to it, you tune out. Because the essay is not really saying anything. It's telling you things, but it's not saying something about the person writing it. And that's the goal. So do the work, do the introspection, and really be smart and thoughtful and strategic about how you're presenting yourself in this application. You will have far more luck. So you want to specifically avoid AI for those two reasons. So, the new GMAT, the new GRE, I think there's a lot in there that I don't want to give high-level advice necessarily. The strategy has changed, what they're evaluating has changed, and they're really trying to focus more on your strategic thinking and get away from this just pure quantitative grinding focus. I served on the board of the GMAT, and I know that they've been trying to continuously improve it for years. One of the biggest changes, and now it's not so revolutionary though, was bringing in the GRE and allowing MBA applicants to use the GRE, and that was done as a way to increase diversity in the applicant pool, where we felt like we were losing highly qualified, smart, interesting applicants who were scared by the GMAT, who had already taken the GRE for maybe law school or some other graduate school, and said, you know, I don't really want to invest the time and money to take the GMAT. So I would strongly encourage you to think about both tests, look at both tests, take a practice exam for each, and decide which test resonates better for you, but also think about your educational background. So for example, if you come from a non-traditional work environment, let's say you work at the UN or a nonprofit, and you majored in English poetry, right, French poetry in undergrad. Well, as an admissions officer, I'm going to be really interested in your intellectual, academic, and professional journey, but I'm going to say, okay, can you handle the quantitative rigor inherent in an MBA classroom? So I would suggest take the GMAT, because the GMAT is a little more quantitatively rigorous, and it gives me a much better indication of your ability to thrive in the classroom. Because as somebody who's building a class, the hardest thing to do is turn away people who are really, really interesting and have these great stories, but you know they just won't survive in your particular classroom. And this was particularly true at Wharton. We take a quantitative approach to everything. Everything is quantified. And so if you can't really, if that's not the right place for you, then we want to let you go so that you can find a program that does fit with you. In terms of test optional, I really don't like that term, optional, because in my mind, you want to do everything you can to stand out and prove your ability, especially if you are an international student. The ability to succeed on an English language standardized test gives us a very good indication of your preparedness for the rigor in a US classroom. That we can talk all day about how maybe that's not fair or it's exclusionary. That's not what I'm trying to get into right now. It is a useful metric. So if you have a very compelling reason why you can't take the test, you're deployed active duty military, or I can't really even think of another example, quite frankly, but you're physically unable to take the test, then you can talk about that in an optional essay and just explain yourself. But for everybody else, it really is just about discipline, focus, and practice, and you can be successful in this. Sure, I think it's inherently dangerous. The premise of the question is inherently dangerous, right? Because yes, they're Southeast Asian applicants, but they have to stand on their own in the overall total pool. And how you evaluate them is not just geographic diversity, right? So if you have a Thai engineer, yes, they're going to be compared to the South Korean engineers and the Japanese engineers, but also the Indian engineers and the American engineers and the French engineers, right? And then you look at components like gender, like education. Did you come up through public schools because you really didn't have any money and you put yourself through on scholarship? Or are you a Southeast Asian engineer who went to private boarding school in the UK and then did your undergrad at Yale? So there are so many different touch points there that I think it's very dangerous to narrow in on a specific geographic concentration. What I do want to talk about is one of the dangers that I've seen repeated from, not dangers, but mistakes that Southeast Asian applicants will make. There tends to be a sameness, a group think when it comes to what I'm doing education-wise, work-wise, outside of work, right? And so you could track in certain countries, 1 year everybody would be playing soccer. And then 2 years later, everybody would be doing archery. And then 2 years later, everybody would be doing rowing. And I mean, it was just like these blocks of students that would move through doing the same thing. And what you have to realize is that, and this is true whether you're applying to undergraduate or graduate programs, if everyone around you is doing the same thing, you're not distinguishing yourself, okay? And yes, I know you're busy. I know that as a young professional, you are immensely busy, but find ways that are dear to your heart to get involved and do something and make a difference. Even if, look, if you're an investment banker, I get it. You have no life, you don't sleep, you're not allowed to leave the firm. It's impossible to have your life outside the firm for the first few years. So find your way onto the recruiting team. Find something that the firm is doing. Maybe they have a pro bono arm where they're doing pro bono work and you can give some of your time to that into projects that you find meaningful. What I have always said and always find is that excellent candidates find a way. They always find a way. I've had investment bankers, and I keep using investment bankers because they have the least control over their time, that have written books, that have started nonprofits, that have made major changes internally in their firm. So whatever it is, find your path, find your way. Entrepreneurs are notoriously bad at this. And I've been an entrepreneur my whole career. I have, at points, lived in my office for months at a time trying to save and grow a business. So I get it. But the fact is that, you always have to find a way to be interesting outside of what you're doing and to do it in a way that is meaningful for you.